Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Engage explores Central Florida's issues and culture with new voices, new perspectives, and thought-provoking interviews. Engage is made possible with the support of members like you and inaugural sponsor, JustCallMo.com. Engage is hosted by Sharon Stone.
You're listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, Florida turned down a major federal aid package that would have provided meals for low-income families. We will talk about the impact. And we'll learn about a popular Paramore restaurant that hits the road to provide lunches for the community. First, though, Andrew Bain is the state attorney representing Florida's 9th Judicial Circuit, serving Orange and Osceola counties. He ascended to this elected position last summer. Governor DeSantis removed his predecessor, Monique Worrell, and appointed Bain to this position. The former pro football player and Orange County court judge has been speaking with Florida residents about de-escalating tense and potentially dangerous encounters with police. Bain is giving advice to citizens about how to cool down encounters when they look like they're getting a bit too hot. We spoke with the state attorney about his seminars, and we started this conversation by explaining why he started this forum.
De-escalation forums are my way of taking the first step of helping the community understand the criminal justice system, law enforcement, bridge that gap between the community and law enforcement. Is my way of helping our community understand, what their rights are when they're encountering law enforcement, understanding that law enforcement is there to help protect them, and that sometimes things that they may perceive as antagonizing or agitating are actually just maybe law enforcement tactics to help them keep the person safe and also keep the law enforcement safe. So it's an idea to make sure everybody gets home safe. That's the whole thing. I want every citizen that, they encounter law enforcement to not fear them and to feel safe when they are interacting with them, and to make sure everybody gets home to their families.
So what had you seen that caused you to develop this program?
Well, there's a lot of things that have been going on, since, George Floyd, and a lot of the things that happened out of that summer that really been obvious to me that people were talking past each other. A lot of people wanted the same things. A lot of people wanted justice. They want to have safe communities. They want to really enjoy their lives. And people were villainizing each other. Whether people were villainizing law enforcement, people were villainizing, the movements that were going on in the protests. And that's not a way to help bring last-longing peace in our community. So my idea was that, let's get back to the basics. What is law enforcement supposed to be doing? And what is the citizen supposed to be doing? And make sure that when they have those interactions, that everybody's going to go home safely. Even if an arrest is going to be made, that is one that is not going to put the other person's life or the law enforcement officer's life in jeopardy. So that's really the idea, to make sure that we're going to be able to get home safely.
Can you describe some of these techniques that you're teaching a bit more, and just where did these ideas or strategies come from? Well,
it's not a new strategy. It's not really a new conversation. It's just really something that's been heightened over the last few years. You would really kind of say this is the talk that my dad had with me when I was a young man, starting to drive, starting to enter the community, starting to be more independent, about how do you deal with people in general. The subject matter is law enforcement, but de-escalation is something that can be used at any time, at any point in your life. Your marriage, your friendships, in your relationships at work with your supervisors. So the idea is, first of all, is to build a level of empathy with the person that you're communicating with. You may not agree with what's going on, but you have to understand that other person on the other side is still another human, and you should treat them like that. And then there's something called momentum. So how you move, your body posture, like I'm sitting here with you, I'm in an open body posture, we're having a conversation, I'm not taking a fighting stance, I'm not threatening you. And even if somebody feels threatened, if you are open with them, usually it's hard to fight with somebody that's that's at peace with you, that's trying to make peace with you. So that's really two of the things that we talk about a lot of is empathy towards each other, your movement, posture, body placement, and then tone, attitudes, those kind of things like that come into play so that you're communicating the message clearly.
Am I correctly understanding that this is intended for the community versus law enforcement?
It's for both. It's for both. So
help me understand how it's both, please.
So law enforcement, they also have a duty to de-escalate with you. So, for instance, law enforcement, when they go to the academy and they go through the training, one of the things they learn is that when you're encountering somebody in the public and you need them to do something, you want to get them loud, concise, strong demands. All right. So what does that really play out to be? That's somebody yelling at you. In common terms, that's somebody yelling at you and ordering you to do something. And most people's reactions to that is like, why are you yelling at me? But that's what they're being trained to do. What we've learned, and law enforcement is learning as well, is that may not at all times be the proper way to communicate with people. But if that is happening to you on the other side as the citizen, you understand that this is just something they're being trained to do. They're not mad with you. They're not angry with you. They're just someone doing exactly what they're trained to do. So my reaction to that can't be to escalate the situation, but to do the exact opposite. It's like, okay, I'm going to comply. I want to de-escalate it. And then the law enforcement officer in that same posture will de-escalate with you. And same vice versa. Sometimes law enforcement comes in too hot. You shouldn't be yelling at people. And that may not be the proper tool to get with the effective communication that you need done. So you need to de-escalate with a person that's already in a heightened state. So if I'm encountering a citizen that's already in a heightened state of panic or fear or anger, me trying to go over top of that as a law enforcement officer doesn't help. I need to de-escalate with that person. I need to bring that person down so then we can start having a clear conversation at that point.
So then what would you say to people who say this escalation begins with the police officer?
Yeah. Again, that's why for a lot of that exactly is that. The law enforcement officer most of the time is just doing what they're trained to do. They're just so somebody in their training course told them that, and they practice in the streets and in their classroom, stop, get on the ground. So that sounds like somebody yelling at you. Mm-hmm. If you're not, if it's, but that's what they're being trained to do. So that escalation, if you meet the person with like the law officer by then starting to yell at the law enforcement officer, then they're going to just continue to escalate. And then now we're in a position where we're both heightening the process and where nobody's getting anywhere like safely. And then now we're going to increase the danger and the likelihood of danger and the likelihood of physical contact between you and the law enforcement officer, because now we're competing and hiding our aggressive nature. But if somebody steps back and pulls back and de-escalates, then the likelihood of the officer even arresting you, you getting into an argument with them, dramatically goes down. Now this is obviously not 100%, probability. But we found that it's a likelihood in the psychology of dealing with these types of encounters between the public, especially in law enforcement.
As we're talking, I'm wondering, do you have a different approach when you're talking about de-escalation with a black man versus perhaps a white woman, for example?
I think it's both, but we know that if it's more likelihood that in high crime areas, in impoverished areas, there are going to be mostly minorities a lot of times living in those areas, especially in inner city locations. So we want to make sure that if you are getting stopped in Washington Shores or Paramore, that your interaction with law enforcement is going to be a safe one, because law enforcement at that point is already heightened. You're in a high crime area. There's an area where violence has occurred and regularly occurs. So they're going to be already in a fear-based heightened situation. And if you add to that, to the law enforcement officer's fear, you're not helping yourself. So why do that? Why try to add to the fear of that law enforcement officer? If you now bring their fears down, then guess what? They're just on a regular street corner. It could have been on Park Ave and in Winter Park for as far as they know. If you bring that level down, but if you do things to help escalate that, likelihood of you being arrested for charge of resisting without violence or some other type charge like that is going to increase. So, go home. My dad's telling you, your goal at the end of the day is to get home safely to you, me and my mom, like my mom and him. And it's like now so different now. Like when I leave the house every day, my job is to get home safely to my wife and my kids. So that's my job. So whatever tools that I need to have in my tool belt to make that happen, I need to be able to deploy. And this is just one tool in your tool belt that you can deploy to make sure you're going to get home safely when you are encountering with law enforcement.
Can you tell us about the forum on the 21st, just what people need to know?
Yeah, so we're going to be at the Grand Ave Neighborhood Center right there at Paramore Kids Zone, and we're going to be putting on a forum between myself, my office, the Stono Institute, NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and the NAACP. And with the City of Orlando Parks and Rec, we're going to put together a forum to talk about exactly what we're talking about right now, to talk about de-escalation. We want to run through some scenarios, like some live scenarios, and kind of show how this plays out. And then we'll have a discussion about, what tools and how do we use those tools to actually affect the result that we're looking for.
And you are running for election this year, but in 2020, Monique Worrell was elected state attorney by 66% of the vote in Orange and Osceola counties. So then you were appointed after she was removed by Governor DeSantis. I would like to know just why should the voters in the Ninth Judicial Circuit have faith in you as their legal representative?
Well, I mean, you could just look at the body of work that we're putting forward. I made a promise that I was going to do everything I could to protect our public from violent offenders. And at the same time, I was going to give everything I could to try to keep nonviolent offenders out of our criminal justice system. So every policy, everything that we've done since I've come into office has been to do that. I'm not here for any other political reason. I don't have a outside agenda. I care about the people here that live in this community that I live in with my family, that I want them to be safe. That's my sole job when I wake up in the morning, every morning.
Andrew Bain is the state attorney representing Florida's 9th Judicial District. Coming up, we hear from the Orange County recently retired Director of Elections, and later in the show, we'll deliver authentic Southern cooking with the owners of Nikki's Place. I'm Sharon Stone, and this is Engage. You are listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. Engage is available on demand at WMFE.org, on our mobile app, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. Ahead on this program, the state of Florida punted on $250 million in federal food aid for low-income families. Critics say the motivation is purely political.
Of the 15 states that have declined the program, all 15 of them have Republican governors. But not all states that have Republican governors turned down the program.
We will talk to Eric Gray of the Christian Service Center of Central Florida about the state turning down summer EBT funding. But first, after 27 years of service, Bill Cowles would like to relax at the beach with his family. He was elected as Orange County's election supervisor back in 1996. Last month, he returned to civilian life, retiring a year short of the conclusion of his term. He doesn't blame the chaos that followed the 2020 election, nor is he concerned about a repeat in 2024. His replacement will be appointed by Governor DeSantis until a new supervisor can be elected in November. Cowles joined Engage to talk about his time in office and his expectations following his departure. He started by pinpointing when he started to think about retirement.
When I got reelected in 2020, and you saw what the political environment was like then, and you see where the political environment has gone going forward, I kind of knew then that I probably would not get all the way through this 4-year term. But then when as I said, when that other door opened, then that began the evaluation process. So who knows, I may have left earlier if it had not been for the special House District 35 election. So I stayed through that. And then I've got a staff here that has over 425 years of elections experience, whether it be here in this office or in other elections offices in other states. So the groundwork has been laid for these elections between now and the November 5th general election, presidential election. So they know the processes, they know how to do it. And the foundation, I've got them the new voting machines last year. We've got all the procedures in play. And we've already had a tune-up by doing that House District 35 election. And now we'll have the presidential preference primary / municipal elections on March 19th. And it will be a little bit bigger than what we've done. They'll build off of that for the primary in general in the fall.
You just mentioned the environment post 2020, and we heard a lot of stories about election supervisors receiving threats from people who were a supporter of then President Trump. Are you concerned about your staff at Orange County moving forward?
No, again, I think you've got to be careful that just because it's happened in some other environment, it's not happening in every elections office. So we've been very fortunate. I think here across the state of Florida, we've been fairly fortunate not to have what we've seen in other states. It's kind of ironic. Florida used to be considered the swing state, and everybody looked to us. But Trump won Florida by 3% in 2020, and really the fight was in those other swing states outside of Florida, where the elections was more contentious than it was here. And then we follow that up by the 2022 election, and Governor DeSantis won his reelection by a landslide. So again, I think it's the recognition of Florida's election code and also of the administration by the 67 supervisors of elections in Florida.
Do you think that you did anything specifically to kind of avoid just controversy and people, second guessing you?
Yeah, there might be a certain newspaper columnist who wrote a farewell message, and he summed it up by calling me Boring Bill. And, I told him that I was honored by that because I worked very hard to be boring. And that meaning I was in the middle of the road. I saw the position as an administrator. And I've always pointed out that us supervisor of elections are professional administrators. We're not policymakers. So we don't get on that side of making policy. And then the other part I've done is I've pretty much stayed right in the middle. I didn't take my political beliefs or my values and go one way or the other. It was all about how to administer the office fair and equal to all who participate in the process, whether you're a voter, whether you became a candidate in the process. It was down the middle, fair for each person.
After Arizona and the recount following 2020 election, what was your impression there?
Well, I think you go back to the basic that I have taught over and over again in high school civic classes, but you also have to remind others that, our United States is unique in that the Constitution says that the federal elections will be the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and that date is set. After that, it says it's up to you, the 50 states and territories, to write your own election laws. And so from that standpoint, that you can't compare one state to another because their laws are different. And so then you come, the next part of that, I think, goes back to the infamous election of 2000. And after that, Florida became the gold standard state with the changes that we made. We got rid of punch cards. We went then eventually in 2006, we went to paper ballots only. And we went to paper ballots because, as Governor Charlie Crist said then, you can always recreate the election when everybody votes on paper. And so, then from that, we tighten up what is a vote, so the voter intent part. We went to a no excuse absentee voting, which later got changed to vote by mail. Yes, the legislator has filed a bill to reverse that. He wants to go back to absentee with excuses. I think that's a step backwards. And I think that, when you think about Central Florida in particular, we're a service industry community where people work all hours, different shifts. There's not a standard Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and you get time off to go vote. And so that's why vote by mail, where you get a ballot, and ballots are secure because there's checks and balances in all these procedures. You got early voting, and early voting has become very popular because you can go vote at your leisure or at what your work schedule will allow you, whether it be one of the weekends that we're open or at night after hours when we have the early voting. So Florida really fixed their laws going forward. Our voting equipment, again, be an optical scan only, and our procedures were streamlined. So when you look at the picture, you got to understand, Arizona has its own laws. It has its procedures. You have states that allow the vote by mails to be counted if they come in after Election Day, not in Florida. Other states, you can't start counting those vote by mail ballots until the polls close. In Florida, we can start as early as 25 days prior to the election to start processing the ballots that are back. And again, I guess it goes to that analogy that we're now people. We want everything now. So at 7:01, if we don't have results, then they think something's wrong. But Florida has streamlined it so that we have probably the fastest results in a national election.
It was very important to you to serve in a nonpartisan way, but you were elected as a Democrat. So I'm curious, what would you say to the number of people who are concerned about the governor, Republican, replacing you with maybe a Republican in Orange County?
Yeah. Well, all along, the supervisors, we've always been supportive of the idea that of any elected position after judges, we should be the most nonpartisan. That's not something we've yet been able to change, but I know my staff right now is very concerned and nervous about what will happen. But again, I keep reminding them that you're the experts. You know what needs to be done. You've got the election calendar. You've got the roadmap to success through this year. And whoever it is, hopefully will be willing to follow their lead and let them guide them through the process.
That's former Orange County Election Supervisor Bill Cowles. January 31st was his final day in office. I should mention that we want to hear from you here on Engage, so let us know what you think or what you think we should be talking about. You can send us an email to engage@wmfe.org. Last year, free or reduced cost lunches were provided by schools to nearly 30 million students across this country. In Florida, more than half of the state's public school students accept free or reduced lunches, and in some cases, we're talking breakfast too. Florida participates in the federally funded National School Lunch Program that provides nutritious lunches on school days. Come summer, school lets out, the free lunches disappear until classes resume in the fall. So to plug that gap, the USDA provides a program called the Summer EBT. It's $40 per child per month for families eligible for EBT or SNAP benefits. Florida and 14 other states chose not to accept this benefit for the residents, though. This decision will impact nearly 50,000 Orange County elementary students, 23,000 middle school students. The state doesn't record high schoolers eligible for free or reduced cost meals. Eric Gray is the executive director of the Christian Service Center, providing housing resources and food relief for low-income Floridians in Central Florida. We spoke with him earlier about food insecurity and the role EBT benefits play.
Well, food insecurity is a huge issue and has been for quite some time in the United States. It's really dominated conversations going back now 40 years around social services, but it continues to move in the wrong direction. And it's particularly troubling as it relates to very young children. And it's something that we try to address through free and reduced school lunch programs, usually breakfast and lunch type programs. And those programs have only gotten bigger year after year after year. And the majority of elementary schools, for example, in the Orange County public school system now have 100% of their students on either a free or reduced school lunch program. And so this isn't something that is for a small percentage of the population. This is the actual majority of students in public school systems are participating in these types of programs.
Eric, do you, best of your knowledge, do these schools offer a summer food program in the absence of a federal program?
Not since, with the exception of the pandemic. So there have been programs around the United States of various types, shapes, and styles. There have been programs, as far as I know, going back to at least 2008 that I'm familiar with, but it's not always consistent. What we're seeing in the last 3 years is there's been a fairly consistent program that we refer to colloquially as the summer program or the summer EBT program. Mm-hmm. EBT is just the acronym for electronic benefits transfer, which is kind of like the ATM card that people use for SNAP benefits. People that aren't familiar with the term SNAP, it's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which we used to call food stamps. And, SNAP benefits can only be used on consumable food that is not pre-prepared. So you can't use it to buy diapers. You can't use it to buy feminine hygiene. You can't even use it to buy pre-made sandwiches at the deli. It can only be used on food that can then be consumed by somebody after preparation. So the idea that families who are lower income need a little bit more assistance in June, July, and August when their school-age children are home and now are not having breakfast and lunch at the schools is a real issue. And for a significant percentage of Central Florida families and frankly, American families, it takes a strain on their budget because they're now paying more money for food over the summer than they would normally. That also hits programs like mine in a pretty big way as well.
I want to talk more about the impact to you as well. But there is a kind of a solution for the summer. It's this program that Florida is not accepting federal money for. Any thoughts on why they turned it down?
Lunacy, idiocy. I think politics is a big part of it. I don't really mind not pulling punches on this one because it really is truly crazy. Of the 15 states that have declined the program, all 15 of them have Republican governors. But not all states that have Republican governors turned down the program. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the governor of Arkansas, accepted the program and touted its unbelievable success rate because during the pandemic, this summer EBT program was being tested and modeled in schools all over the United States. All 50 states participated in it, and it showed extremely good outcomes across multiple different measures, not only with children's nutrition, but also with the economic impacts on the families that were being assisted by it, and almost completely barren of any type of fraud that was associated with the program. There's no reports of anything that was remarkable in terms of people misusing the program. So it's one of those gold standard programs that really has no reason to turn it down, except that there's a growing number of states who are leaning more and more towards refusing federal funds for different projects in a way to detach themselves from the federal government. You see it happen with Department of Education funding now. They're turning away funds so they can have more control over education programs. You see it with Medicaid expansion. There's still, I believe, it's either 8, 9, or 10 states that have not expanded Medicaid. Florida is one of them. And this is money that we're paying to the federal government as taxpayers. I'm paying, you're paying, anybody listening to this program is paying, that we are not getting back because it is going to the other states because our state legislature in their wisdom has chosen to say, no, we don't need those funds, but they have not given good reason why they don't need those funds. The reasons that they do share are really not reasonable.
You're the executive director of the Christian Service Center. Talk to me about the domino effect. That program, you don't get the funding. How does that affect what you can do?
So the three most common things that people spend money on in the United States, regardless of your level of income and in order, are housing, transportation, and food. And it used to be that the number two area was food. In fact, going back about 50 years ago, food was a bigger percentage of people's budget than housing was. And then that got replaced by housing, and now transportation has moved into the second spot. What's happened is, as a result, people aren't buying less food. They're purchasing less quality food. And so you now have this obesity epidemic that has been rampant in the United States now for 35 years, and it is overtaking smoking as the most preventable cause of death in the United States. So every state in the country has a majority population of people who are obese. Every single state, all 50 states, all 5 territories, and all 4 of the major tribal communities in the United States, they all have an obesity epidemic. And this is directly related to people's inability to afford quality food. When you can't afford quality food, it's not because you're choosing to eat bad food. It's because you just can't afford fruits, vegetables, produce, and things. And that's because you're spending more of a percentage of your income on housing or on transportation. And that has a domino effect to where I end up seeing people who are homeless. And I see a growing number of homeless families with children and a growing number of elderly adults that are homeless. And that's the domino effect that is so tragic in our country and right here in Central Florida.
Do you see an improvement or a way to change that?
Absolutely. The science on these types of issues is actually incredibly well done. There's numerous solutions. As it relates to housing, there's a whole approach called Housing First that has shown remarkable advances in the United States. When it comes to food insecurity, there has been remarkable advances, particularly as it relates to helping children within the school system, actually making sure that SNAP benefits are made available to the families that need it. And there's still this real push that somehow people are abusing it or they're not deserving of it. We're talking about families that might qualify for this one program we're talking about, summer EBT program. These are families whose net income is at the poverty level. So for a single individual, you're talking about a person who is earning around $13,000 a year or less. $13,000 a year or less. I mean, that's below minimum wage. So for a family of 4, which is about the average size family in Orange County, you're talking about a total income for that household of around $32,000. I mean, those are the people who qualify. So we're not talking about huge swaths of the population who are qualifying for these types of benefits. We're looking at the smaller bottom 20% of families who are incredibly struggling to make ends meet. And why turn away a program like this because of politics? The notion is that, well, we don't want to have to pay for the administrative rate. Well, the states are being required to pay half of the administrative costs, where the federal government are picking up the other half. So in a program like this, where 10% of the funding is administrative at most, that's about $25 million of the program. The state of Florida is being asked to pick up $12.5 million, but in return is getting $238 million of money that we've already sent to the federal government that's going to support hungry children. I mean, we can all agree on hungry children, can't we? I mean, that's a cause worth supporting with tax dollars. So I don't understand the rationale behind not wanting to support these types of scientifically based proven programs.
Eric, how do you feel when you see these children, these families that are hungry?
It's desperately horrible. I mean, it's a nightmare. You know, I have a family that I talked to on the way here that I've been really trying to help, and I feel like a failure that we haven't been able to help them more. You know, little Oceana and Eugene, and they are 9 and 10, and they're going to the ACE school in Paramore, but they are living on the sidewalk right now. And I have done everything I can do to help them, and they just continue to fall through the cracks. And then after that, they fall through more cracks. And after that, they fall through more cracks. And so there are just not enough forms of assistance. And what I feel on the same side when it's this desperation and sadness when you see families like this, I also feel a lot of anger because there's far more welfare in the United States that are supporting the upper 20% of the income population in our country than there is the bottom 20%. According to Matthew Desmond in his book, Poverty by America, one of the things he researched was that the top 20% of income households in the United States receive about $36,000 in tax subsidies or other benefits from the federal government, whereas the bottom 20% of families each have about $25,000. So there's this notion that people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps somehow. But you know, this is everybody in the United States is receiving some type of assistance. It may not be cash assistance, it may not be food assistance, but it's some type of assistance, even if it's the mortgage tax credit, which is 6 times the amount of money we spend on affordable housing subsidies in the United States. So there's it's a perspective, and I just always really bristle when people give this notion of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, because you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you have no damn boots to begin with. It's just impossible.
Eric Gray is the executive director of the Christian Service Center. Now, we did reach out to the Florida Department of Children and Families a couple of times for comment on the refusal of summer EBT benefits. DCF said they would get back to us. They had not done that so by airtime, though. Coming up, Nikki's Place serves the Paramore community in their dining room and in the neighborhoods. And an honor for an Orlando sports icon who stands head and shoulders above the rest. You're listening to Engage. You're listening to Engage on 90.7 WMFE. I'm Sharon Stone. The Orlando Magic are retiring jersey number 32 tonight. That's the number Shaquille O'Neal wore. Ceremony will be held after the Magic host the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Kia Center. So Shaq will be the first player to have his number retired by the franchise. The voice of the Magic, play-by-play broadcaster David Steele is joining us now live. David, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Sharon.
So you have been with the team for all 35 seasons. Take me back. What were your first impressions of Shaquille O'Neal when he joined the Magic as the first-round pick in the 1992 NBA draft?
Well, I knew a little bit about him, Sharon. He played at LSU, a major Southeastern Conference basketball team for 3 years. So it was pretty well known that Shaq was going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft that year. The draft lottery occurred on May the 17th of 1992, and that's when the Magic found out that they would get the number 1 pick. And I just remember being in my living room and, just fingers crossed, standing up nervously, palms sweating, hoping for that number 1 pick because Shaq was clearly the guy. And it happened, and we got him, and he put the Orlando Magic on the map very early in the franchise history. It was only year number 4 when Shaq joined the Orlando Magic. So it's very unusual for a pro sports franchise to make a big leap like that from basically obscurity into the national spotlight. And it was all because of Shaquille O'Neal's arrival.
Do you think that putting Orlando on the map, that spread beyond sports? Do you feel like he did something for Central Florida as well?
Yeah, I think so. He was more than a sports figure. He became a national celebrity, a personality. He was a larger than life figure right from the very beginning. I mean, clearly he's made a career out of his identity as the big fella Shaq, and it started back there in Orlando as a young 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old basketball player that just had an enormous personality, that big smile. He started doing commercials very early on, and so it spread beyond the basketball court. It spread beyond Central Florida, and he is certainly now an international icon and was well on his way to that status back even in the early and mid 90s.
I love how clearly you remember just hoping for that first round pick, but we are now 30 years later. How do his accomplishments or play on the court stack up against the other Magic players that you have been seeing since then?
Well, I mean, he was the rookie of the year that first year. He made the All-Star team as a rookie, which is very unusual. He was All NBA 3 of the 4 years that he played in Orlando. So, you compare him. Dwight Howard had a longer stretch and had more accolades because he played more years in Orlando. But, Tracy McGrady was also multiple-time All-NBA player. Penny Hardaway was a first-team All-NBA player. So really, when you look at it, the Magic have sort of a Mount Rushmore, if you will, of players. And I would put Shaq at the top of that. And then you've got Dwight Howard, Penny Hardaway, and Tracy McGrady. And certainly Shaq belongs right up there at the top of that Mount Rushmore.
Shaq was actually only with the Magic from 92 to 96. From Orlando, he went on to play with the Lakers, and we know he and Kobe Bryant had a lot of success, winning 3 championships. David, are you surprised that the Magic are retiring his number when he only spent 4 seasons here?
No, I think I'm not surprised. I think the reason is because just what we've been talking about, just the fact that he put the city, he put the franchise on the map. Without Shaq, it's arguable that the team could have wallowed in obscurity, the franchise, for another 8 to 10 years, and you don't know what the future might have held. I think because Shaq and then Penny Hardaway came along the next year, I think those early years of success were instrumental in building an identity for the Orlando Magic franchise. So just the fact that he was such a great player so early in his career, took the team to the NBA Finals in his 3rd season in Orlando, the franchise's 6th season in existence in the NBA. I think those factors warrant retiring his jersey. Also, you throw in that, the Lakers have retired his jersey, and so have the Miami Heat. So he joined some pretty elite company. Wilt Chamberlain is the only other NBA player to have his jersey retired by 3 NBA franchises. So I think Shaq is well deserving of that.
David Steele is a broadcaster and announcer for the Orlando Magic basketball team. Thank you so much for your time and perspective.
Thanks, Sharon.
Nikki's Place has been serving authentic Southern food in Paramore for nearly 75 years. Owners Elaine and Nick Aiken Jr. have run the 20-seat restaurant on Carter Street for 25 of those years. Elaine manages the books, Nick runs the kitchen, and their daughter Nikki works the dining room. The food has stayed pretty much the same since Nick started working for the previous owner back in 1953. The menu is simple on paper.
It's a home-cooked meal. Nothing fast about it. Old-fashioned, Paramore style, smothered ribs, chitlins, hog maws, baked chicken, nice cabbage, collard greens, macaroni and cheese.
But the flavors offer a complex journey through the culinary history of Black America. Nikki's hasn't gone unnoticed. Muhammad Ali ate there. So did Coretta Scott King. Even Elvis enjoyed the pork chops. But it's the loyal Paramore community that has kept Nikki's going decade after decade. And every Friday afternoon, Nick loads half a dozen coolers with carry-out containers and throws them into the back of a battle-worn cargo van cresting 500,000 miles. Around 2 o'clock, after the lunch rush has died down, Nick hits the streets of Paramore with his assistant, Newt.
We came from South Carolina, and we moved here on Cayley Street in the beginning because my uncle was working for the railroad. Then after my father came down, we moved on Paramore. And that's where we stayed, on Hicks Quarters on Paramore. Then I got jobs on Paramore, and I finally got the job where I'm working right now, washing dishes and learning how to cook.
Nick is selling lunches out of the van, smothered pork chops, meatloaf, baked chicken, and sides.
Give me the fried pork chop. Okay, you got banana pudding?
Yes, I have.
Give me that.
Made the banana pudding this morning.
He said that I get a discount because you did me wrong last Friday.
Okay,
I get a discount.
I'll give you a discount. The meal costs $25. I'll give you a $5 discount.
What?
Now you understand.
Why you do me like that, man? I'm hungry as hell.
Well, now I'm bringing the food to fill you up, baby.
What's the price? He said, what? How much it is? God, oh, man.
Hey, I got an extra grain of rice on the plate.
Nick has a route he follows. The customers are regulars. He's been doing this about 10 years. And on the rare Fridays when he can't get out of the kitchen to sell on the streets, he hears about it.
What happened to you, Mr. Nick? So I had a lot of business at the restaurant. That was said, some guys who were looking for me. I said, what happened to you last week? So I said, well, we'll be heading out. We coming out this week. Yeah, regulars, week over week. And they'll be coming to look for me. So, and I'll be looking for him.
Nick knows everyone in this neighborhood. He honks at everybody he passes.
Hey there!
He knows every building and has a story to go with them all.
Jackson Center, every day. When I get out of school, I used to go there, play around in the field. And we went to Jackson. He said, young man, better go to school now. Yes, sir. See that grocery store right there, little shop? That used to be an insurance company back in the day. This used to be ABC liquor store right here. This is the same. Right on the corner up here, we'll come off of Carter Street. On this section was a place called Dixie Doodle, where I used to catch the orange bus going to the Orange Grove back in the day.
And he's seen the community change many times in many ways.
You had less people. Now it's less people in the Paramore area. See, everybody's scattered. This used to be packed. You know, you had to walk. When you're walking out here, walking person to person. Now you can walk anywhere you want to go. Don't hardly see nobody. Back in the day, it was packed. So I've seen the change. And more change are coming. But what I see now, more homes are being built, and I see the people coming back to Paramore because it's less troublesome. It's less dangerous, you know. That's just my opinion. But I see more homes over there being built, more homes further down Paramore being built. I see the people are coming back to the area, and it's very, very quiet.
Nick isn't out here just for the business. He genuinely loves the neighborhood, and he knows that selling these lunch plates is hit or miss.
As you see, it's a gamble when you go out on the road. Nothing is exact, nothing is promised to you. Every time you come out, it's a gamble. The people be waiting on you. Sometimes we go knock on the door, they want something. Sometimes they knock on the door, they don't want anything. So, here come Mama now. She usually gets home 3 or 4 dinners. How you doing, darling?
All right.
At the end of the day, he gives the meals he doesn't sell to people on the streets. Nikki's place is more than good food. It's a nexus for gathering in Paramore. And on the streets, Nick Jr. is the community's fixture.
Yeah, we always want him. We miss him every time. On Fridays, we be waiting on him.
That's all for today's edition of Engage, and we want to hear from you. You can email us at engage@wmfe.org. A quick thank you to Jill, Warren, Abby Moody, and the others who have already reached out via email. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for the company. All Things Considered is next.